The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
The question is that if you have a chance to be almost anything, what are you? What do you become? And I think that's the difficulty of it, in a sense, is that why weren't we more?
Then, later on The Agenda.
I have seen what being out on the land can do to a person. If they can remember making some kind of connection with the land or with the water, then chances are they will work to protect those places.
Also tonight.
When you can be here and you can take a deep breath and you can sort of be in sync with the animals, it's a different plane.
Think back to your high school graduation class. There were probably jocks and brainiacs, class clowns and bumps on a log, just like every class. But did you think there was a nearly 500-page book in the lifelong exploits of your fellow classmates? Well, Ken Dryden clearly did. The Hall of Fame goaltender, Stanley Cup champion, and former cabinet minister has written a book about people he spent his formative years with, whom we don't know, but end up interested in, cheering for, and shedding a tear for when their lives face tragedy. And Ken Dryden joins us now here in the studio for more on The Class, a memoir of a place, a time, and us. Ken, it's great to have you back here in this studio.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Lovely to see you
Glad
again.
to be here.
You know, I must say, it would never occur to me that there would be a book in the people I went to high school with. What made you think there was for the folks you went to high school with?
Because I think we're all fascinated with our own question of how we got from there to here in terms of our lives. And I know that in my case, you know, that I had no idea where my life was going to end up. I had certain things that I had in mind that I thought might be in my future, and almost none of them came to pass. And most people that I know, it was the same. And I was quite sure it would be the same for our high school class. And because none of us really stayed in much contact with the others, that we didn't really know for sure. And so this was a time to find out. And it was just this terrific adventure to go on.
Now, if I may say, you look a lot younger than you are. So you better put the year out there. What year was your graduation year?
My graduation year was 1965.
At Etobicoke Collegiate Institute.
That's right.
And you called yourselves the Brain Class.
Well, we didn't call ourselves the Brain Class, but others called us the Brain Class, which was one of those things where we were alternately embarrassed about, and at the same time, well, that's not such a bad thing. But why it came to be was that we were a specially selected class. We had taken tests during elementary school. None of us really remembered taking the test, but we did. And it was on the basis of a test and also of our elementary school's teacher recommendation that we were one of 35 to go into this class. And so our first day, you know, that came from 4 elementary schools. We probably, on average, knew 3 or 4 other students going into that first day, the day after Labor Day in 1960.
Okay, here's an excerpt from the book. First one we'll do here during our conversation. Sheldon, if you would, let's put this up and I'll read along for those listening on podcast. Everyone in our high school class, all 35 of us, went to university, and all but 3 of us graduated. We were 21, 22, 23 years old. From promise and possibility from all those years in Etobicoke at ECI, in the Brain Class, now we were immersed in a world of our own making. Big job decisions, big personal decisions were right in front of us that would set the course of the next big directions of our lives. Marriage or not, kids or not, when, how many, living where, doing what. Big decisions indeed. How daunted do you remember yourself being at this stage of your life, facing those kinds of decisions?
I think that the big a parent decision wasn't a decision. The big thing was to go to university. And that was the spirit of that time in that place. Almost none of our parents had gone to university, but they were finding their way after World War II, and they were starting to do better in a Canada that had in front of it all of these possibilities. I mean, Europe was decimated by the war. A lot of the rest of the world, the empires were breaking up. There were newly independent countries trying to find their way. North America was in this incredibly special place of being able to create what seemed, the possibility of whatever we wanted to create. And what our parents knew was the foundation of that was going to be university. And they just wanted for us to have the chance to go to university.
But you made a very unusual decision, because most kids who grow up in Etobicoke go to Western or U of T or Queens or something, or George Brown or Seneca, Humber. You went to Cornell in Ithaca, New York. How come?
Because I wanted an adventure. I wanted to go away. I didn't feel even like Western or Queens was going away. Certainly the U of T wasn't going away. And I'd always had a US fascination. And I think it came from sports. That following Major League Baseball and where were all of the big league teams of the time. Following college football, where were all of those teams? And television. I mean, at the time when I was a kid, there were 3 television stations, and 2 of them were from Buffalo. And almost all the shows that we wanted to watch were on Buffalo TV. And so I had this kind of southward gaze, really, and an adventure for me was going to be going to the US, and the schools that I had in mind were either Cornell or Princeton, and I was going to go there.
Well, you say you look south, but you also say you were insistently Canadian while at Cornell. What does that mean?
Well, it surprised me. I mean, and I think it was because all of my classmates were Americans, and they would kind of sort of ignore or dismiss the fact that Canada really existed and that Canadians had mattered at all. And so, I mean, I found myself, like, whenever they would talk about anything, I'd say, Perry Mason, Raymond Burr, he's from Vancouver, and what about Bonanza? Lauren Green, he's a Canadian. And what about Paul Anka and I forget her name, Giselle Mackenzie? Where are they all from? They're from Canada. And I would interrupt everybody when they would be talking about anything to bring up something about Canada.
Your team at Cornell wins the American Collegiate Hockey Championship. Was it obvious to you in achieving that you were now going to be a professional hockey player someday?
No, it was
nobody's going to believe that answer.
No, I understand. I mean, and I've given the answer many times before, and I've never been believed. So I'm expecting it. No, I never thought that there was a connection between a kid playing for Humber Valley and Maple Leaf Gardens. I mean, that was another world. That was a world that was on television every Saturday night. And on that screen were people that I didn't know, I had never met, and they were there, and I was here. And it didn't matter that I was a pretty good minor hockey player and played junior B, and we did well, and then went to Cornell, and it turned out we were better than any of us thought. And even at the end, when we had done really well, and I was reading how the Canadians were following me and scouting me and all the rest of it. And Sam Pollock, traveled to Toronto or traveled to Ithaca to watch us play the University of Toronto.
GM of the Canadians.
The GM of the Canadians. Even when I arrived in Montreal, I mean, I can remember the first practice of going out, on the ice. And by that time, it was players like Yvan Cournoyer, Jean Béliveau, Jacques Lemaire. I mean, it's like, what am I doing here? I am going to get killed. And you just find out, that's all.
I want to ask you about a blind date that you went on, and the woman that you were on that blind date with, you apparently gave a written quiz on Canada to, because she was an American student. Whatever happened to her?
Well, I know we've been married for, despite all of that, for a very long time.
It's 53 years?
Yeah, that's
53 years.
Yeah.
What'd you think about that quiz idea?
Well, like it didn't seem that odd to me, which again was kind of, part of the oddness of it and part of the look that I have here of being kind of dorky.
What is with those ears, Ken?
Well, it took me a long time to grow into those ears.
But you did.
But yeah, that was a blind date that was set up by my roommate and Linda's roommate. They were brother and sister, and they were also students at Cornell, and they just thought we should meet.
Love at first sight? You knew she was going to be the one?
Well, I may have, but I don't think she did.
Okay, let's talk about some of your other classmates from high school, because as you mentioned, you followed them over the, you re-got in touch with them, I guess, if I can put it that way. Your class was unique in some ways and very typical in other ways. Steve Wistance-Smith. Dropped out of university to help found the Tarragon Theatre in Toronto. Yeah. Kathy McNabb, part of a group that established University of Toronto Radio. Right. Both of those institutions still around 50 years later. Right. Wayne Yetman, 36th best marathon runner in the world. How impactful do you think those things turn out to be in their lives ultimately?
That's a very good question. I think. Well, I think hugely in that way of where if you discover you can do something, then you're more likely to try the next thing, and you may not know you can do the next thing, but you may not believe that you can't. And so, somebody like Wayne, I mean, he was a distance runner at a time in high school when nobody ever wanted to be a distance runner. I mean, Bruce Kidd had just come along and he was making a name for himself and for Canadians in distance running. But for anyone else, I mean, nobody wanted to run any kind of distance. It was boring. It hurt your lungs. You didn't do it. And Wayne wasn't fast enough to be a sprinter. But he could run, and he would continue to run, and he would run cross country, and nobody wanted to run cross country because it was always raining in the fall. And he just got a little bit better and a little bit better all the time. Never had the sprinting speed, even for a marathoner to kind of find a way to, well, he ends up making the Canadian Olympic team in 1976. And running in the Boston Marathon and finishing high there, and turned out to be a terrific runner. And I suspect that part of that for Wayne would be, yeah, I can do stuff.
Lorna Casey has a child, and then her husband dies. She's a 27-year-old widow. Right. Marilyn Cade gets a call from her babysitter saying that her child of 5 months has died in his crib. Those two women, how were they not destroyed by those tragedies?
Because I think they knew they couldn't be. That they were young, and I think, like for most of us at a certain point, and probably at every point, things happen, and you have to decide how to understand those things. And you can either understand them in a way that where you see yourself as, this is stuff that just happens to me, it always happens to me, it's always going to happen to me, I'm never going to get over this. Or for some reason, and whether it's in you, it's in the people around you and how they treat you, it's like, no, I have a life to live. I have another 50 years of my life ahead of me. And I have to find a way of living that life. That doesn't mean that my husband didn't die when I was 27 years old and left me as a single mother at that time. That is a reality of my life. It is always going to be a reality of my life. But I have to create other realities as well. And the same thing for Meryl and Cade after the death of their son, is that we have to go on and continue to make a life that we were making for ourselves up until that time. Robert will always be a part of us.
That's the child.
That's the child. But we also have to live our lives.
At what point in your life do you realize, because when you graduate from grade 13 and you go off and do what all of you tried to do, you just think the world is filled with endless possibilities and it's going so swimmingly. And then, per the examples I've given here, then you come to realize, boy, real life is about taking shots almost every day and figuring out, when does that lesson really hit home?
I think it probably starts to hit home once, a little bit after university, a couple of years after university probably, when you're not in the job exactly that you were hoping to be in. You're not doing quite as well as you thought you might. And also I think maybe when you if you get married and have kids and realize that there are day-to-day challenges in all of this, and that the focus needs to be so much on that day-to-day and much less on the horizon of possibilities. And that you're going to make your possibilities in tomorrow as opposed to a year from now or 5 years from now. And probably by the time, that we're in our mid-30s, we're along some path. And by the early 40s, have something of an understanding that this is kind of the path of my life. And for the most part, and I think is that it's like, it's okay. It's an all right path. It's not the path that I thought I would be on, but actually, I kind of like this path. And I think for most people, that's what happened. I know that, like when I was playing with the Canadiens, I mean, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm playing with the Montreal Canadiens. We're traveling around the U.S. playing U.S. teams, and often, where fellow classmates at Cornell are. And they would, make contact with me when I would be in town. The first couple of years that I would run into them was kind of fun. We were just out of college together. Then by the late 20s, it wasn't so much fun because they were finding themselves not quite where they wanted to be, and they saw me as if I was where I wanted to be, and that made us that much different, and that they needed to pretend, and pretending wasn't fun. Then after that, it started to become good again. It was that they were the real them, I was the real me, and then we could, find a way of dealing with each other that way.
But your career is fascinating for a couple of reasons. Number one, because of the incredible success you have as a professional hockey player. But then, of course, that career is over at age 31. Mm-hmm. So you're looking for another career at a time when all of your classmates are just sort of ramping up into theirs.
That's right.
I want to pluck something out of the book here that I suspect a lot of people don't know about. They know about the 6 Stanley Cups you won with the Habs, Team Canada 1972, Calder Trophy for the best rookie, Conn Smythe Trophy for the best player in the playoffs, 5 Vezinas for the best goaltender during the regular season. Where on that list of accomplishments would you put the events of March 20th, 1971, when you were in goal for the Habs and a guy named Dave Dryden was in goal for the Buffalo Sabres?
Well, it was special. And I mean, it was special for a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, Dave's 6 years older than me, and he was who I wanted to be. I mean, he could do everything that I wanted to do. I mean, he could catch a puck. when I would go off my wrist or something. He could field a ground ball in a way in which I could. He could throw a curveball, when I couldn't throw a curveball. And so, he just did what I wanted to do. So finally, he was with Chicago, then he was with Buffalo in the NHL. And here's this weird night, which I didn't realize was March the 20th in 1971. And I had just been brought up to the Canadiens. And Dave was with the Sabres, and it was the first year of the Sabres, and they weren't going to make the playoffs. And so everybody knew that. And Punch Imlach was the coach. And he kind of liked to see interesting, intriguing things happen. And so this might be interesting and intriguing. So he wanted for us to play against each other. But Al McNeil, our coach, it was Rogie Vachon's turn to play, and he was going to play. So that's how it started. And the odd part is that our dad, who was in Toronto, he calls me up, I don't know, Thursday night or something, and says, I think I'm going to come down for the weekend. And I said, yeah, well, come down for sure, but don't be disappointed, because I know you're going to be disappointed because I'm not playing. And if you're just going to be here and be disappointed, then you may as well stay home. Well, I think I'm going to come. So the game begins, and I'm on the bench, and Dave starts the game, but then he's brought to the bench when Imlach sees that I'm not playing. First period, we're just sitting on the bench, looking at each other. Early in the second period, Rogie Vachon gets hurt. I go in. As soon as I go in, Dave goes in. So for almost 2 periods, and our dad is there.
How come not your mom?
She had a hard time watching games. I mean, it was classic watching her, and hearing about her. That if the rink was this way, and she's watching the rink, and I'm in one end, and Dave is in the other, she'd be like this. And she would kind of look up a little bit when she had a sense that the puck was out of our zone and not in Dave's zone. So she'd follow it in mid-ice, but then we'd be back down like this, until finally she sort of asked the two of us if it was okay if she didn't come.
You say that Dave was kind of your hero and he was the guy you wanted to be, but I'm just going to say this. You surpassed him in every way imaginable in your professional careers. Both the teams you played for, the individual accomplishments you achieved that he did not. How awkward did that get at a certain point?
I don't think it did, because Dave wouldn't allow it to be awkward. And I wouldn't either, but he's the one who made it work. And the other part of it is that in terms of goaltending, that we did better than the Buffalo Sabres did. Dave was a teacher, and Dave went back to be a teacher, and he became an elementary school teacher after his hockey career. Then he became a vice principal. Then he became a principal. And I'm not sure that there are too many jobs that have more of an effect on more people than a teacher's job. And Dave was as special a teacher in school as he was to me and everyone else. So, that if you're sort of drawing achievement lines, look there.
Okay. He died not that long ago.
That's right.
Which I suspect is one of the reasons you're having a little trouble talking about him right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. I want to ask you about something quite tragic here. You and I have a couple of things in common, actually. We're both born in Hamilton, and the first classmates of ours to die were both lost to suicide, your case and mine. To this day, 45 years later, in my case, I don't know why that happened. The young woman in our case was beautiful, brilliant, seemed to have everything going for her, and at age 18, for whatever reason, she was lost to suicide. In your case, it's a guy named Craig McGregor. Do you know, all these years later, why he was lost to suicide?
No. And I mean, and I asked our other classmates as well, and they don't know. And I couldn't find any surviving family members that his parents would have passed away. None of us knew whether he had brothers or sisters, and so we don't know. And we don't even know for sure that it was suicide. It was, you know, it's kind of understood to be, but that was as much as we know.
It still infuriates me that it happened and that I don't know why it happened.
Right.
Does it bother you?
Yeah, I mean, like that. I mean, this book is about, like, why did stuff happen? I mean, for all of us. I mean, for all 35 of us. I mean, you know, how did it happen? Why did it happen? What made it happen? Why didn't something else happen? And so it's the same for Craig as for the rest of us. And I mean, I think that's the fascination of this kind of inquiry, and I think, you know, we all do it, and we all go through it. Is, you know, like, why are you sitting here? How the heck did you get here from that, you know, boyhood in Hamilton? You know, what was the path that got you here? And it could have been a whole lot of other paths, and it could have been moments. I mean, there could have been moments that absolutely would have shifted you way off to something else, and that wouldn't have turned out very well at all. And so, yeah, I mean, that was the fun of this book. And the thing that was also funny is that I thought about writing this book for about the last 30 years. This was the time to write it. This was the age to write it. This was the time at which, you know, that you have fewer other things to do. I mean, most everybody else is retired, and you wonder things like this. Is that, man, how did I get here? And so these long conversations I had with each of my classmates, they were a mutual puzzling through. I mean, this wasn't as if we started with answers and somebody was just sort of spewing out the answer that they had rehearsed, you know, for 30 years, and that, you know, to a friend who happened to ask the question. It's like, no, you know, you start maybe with a glib answer, but then the longer you talk, glib doesn't work. And so really, what happened and how and why?
Let's do one more excerpt from the book. Those of us in the brain class haven't lived in traditional heroic times. We fought no great wars, survived no great depressions. Greatness wasn't asked of us or forced upon us. Greatness was an option. As I read that, I wondered, do you wish you had lived in more consequential times?
I don't know how to answer. I mean, you know, it'd be easy to that more consequential times, you know, would probably suggest world wars, and are those the times that one wants to live through? I mean, I think that the big interesting part of our times is that what do you do, I guess, when you don't live in historically consequential times or big headline like consequential times, and when at a time when in fact you can kind of determine to a significant extent what those times are going to be. They're not forced upon you by you know, other countries and your own deciding to go to war or through depression. And so, you know, that what we were, more than, you know, being described as baby boomers, we were post-war kids. That's who we were. That's, if anything, that's what was the defining feature of us. We were born mostly in 1947, a few in 1946, and as I said earlier, into a Canada that was looking to find out what we are and what we might be. And so much of the thinking, you know, and reading magazines and newspapers and a sense and a feeling of a time through the 50s was this was a country that was going to be. Whatever we are now, we were actually a place that was going to be. The big, you know, the development of the North, the development of you know, finding oil in Leduc, Alberta, the aluminum company plant in Arvida, Quebec, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the building of, you know, I mean, all of these things were going to be us. The question is that if you have a chance to be almost anything, what are you? What do you become? And I think that's the difficulty of it, in a sense, is that why weren't we more? Why like we thought the suburbs were fabulous. People now look back on the suburbs and they turn up their noses and say, oh, you know, it's every house is the same. That's not how it seemed to us. That's not how it seemed to our parents. This was this amazing new place, new houses, new, you know, churches, new playgrounds, new arenas, space, green. I mean, all of that stuff. And so what does one do with those kinds of possibilities? And do we think great thoughts? Do we all become philosophers? Do we all ditch rock and roll music and love the classics? I mean, and because we didn't do all of those things, and because essentially all that came out of that time was something that was better for more people. And what's wrong with better for more people? I think that's probably the biggest accomplishment, you know, really of this generation.
That's Ken Dryden, and the name of the book is The Class, a memoir of a place, a time, and us. Thanks for this.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
If you ever needed motivation to leave urban Ontario behind, meet Lenore Kishik of the Anishinaabe Cultural Experiences Program.
Ani bonjour, Lenore Indishnikaz, mein gan indodam, nia shingaming indonjaba, minwa Cape Croker Park. So I just told you my name. My name is Lenore. I told you that Mein Gun, the wolf, is my clan or my extended family. My sound, my voice comes from Niashinigaming, aka Cape Croker. I work for the Anishinaabe Cultural Experiences Program, and I take people out on guided hikes, guided canoe programs, anything that I can facilitate to help people have a good experience when they come to visit us. It's important for people to connect with nature because we are part of nature. I think a lot of people forget that. We are what we eat, so we eat from the land, we eat from the water, and we need to be able to take care of the land and the water. My colleagues and I, what we try to do is create an experience, a memorable experience for people. It doesn't have to have a lot of flash or a lot of color. It could be very subtle, but it needs to be a good time. I have seen what being out on the land can do to a person. If they can remember making some kind of connection with the land or with the water, then chances are they will work to protect those places. And it's not just, you know, helping protect what we have here at Niashinigaming, but it's protecting those places where they themselves come from, whether it's Toronto or Ottawa or Orangeville. My favorite part of the work I do here at the park is taking people out on hikes and having lunch along the trail. Eating food, sharing that time, having time then to just kind of chat. And it also reminds me of when I was young and we would go out picking berries with my grandparents, that we always had a lunch with us, and we always sat down as a grouping to eat our lunch and to laugh and to just be in nature, just be under the trees or in the bush. One of the things I like to do is I like to work with fibers, and just doing very rudimentary things like make rope or cordage. I use cattails, cattail leaves. I harvest them while they're green. I let them dry for a day or two, and then I put them in water to dampen them, and then I start to twist them into a rope. And the rope is very strong. It's also very pliable. Another of the fibers I use is milkweed, which is amazing. So I collect the milkweed and I strip the outside bark, and then I will take those and I will twist those into cordage. And that kind of cordage would have been used, say, for like bowstrings or fishing nets, fishing lines. So this is a story about the rainbow. I write poetry and I'm a storyteller. And a number of years ago, before my father passed away, he asked me to translate a word for him. Now it's kind of funny because I know words and I know phrases in Anishinaabe. So I can say things like your feet stink, salt and pepper, potatoes, fart, and stuff like that, right? And so he asked me to help him translate this word for rainbow. And his word for rainbow is nagweyab. And he said to me, he said, everything you know about a rainbow is in that word. And then he made this beautiful motion like this. He said, yob, colored ribbons. And I could see the beauty of the language. And so what I wrote it out for him. I wrote, sunlight shining through raindrops sends colored ribbons across the sky. And I thought, ooh, this is a really nice piece of poetry. And sometime later, I was making a presentation at a gathering, and I shared with the people there my feat of translation, which I was really proud of. And there was an elder sitting at the back, and this person piped up and said, "That's a very good translation, but you forgot something." He said, "You forgot to say when Father Sky gives Mother Earth a drink of water." So now the whole translation I will give to you. Sunlight shining through raindrops sends colored ribbons across the sky when Father Sky gives Mother Earth a drink of water. So we have the scientific explanation of the refraction of light. We've got the poetry of the language with the colored ribbons, and we've got our relationship, Father Sky and Mother Earth. Well, if you went on a hike with me, let's say in the spring, like April, we'd probably see some of the earliest flowers to come up are hepaticas. Wild ginger comes out at that time. Wild leeks are about maybe 2 or 3 inches high. Blue cohosh, which actually are black, or they look black. So it's like these little black stalks with these beautiful little black flowers with tiny little yellow stamens. If we did something in the fall, then there's probably a good chance that we'd see all kinds of mushrooms and other fungi. If we were doing a night walk, we would hear various animal calls, owls, you could hear loons, all these wonderful nighttime creatures. I don't like to teach people to forage. One has to understand that you don't pick the area clean. In Quebec, for example, it's illegal to pick wild leeks because they've been over-harvested. And I don't want to see that happen here. I've had the experience of going on hikes and people are fearful. because they don't know the trail, or they're fearful because they don't know how to behave when they're out on the land. And it's because they really don't understand, I guess you'd call it the protocol. When you're out on the trail, you don't make a lot of noise. People don't have to know that you're coming along the trail. And you know, the quieter you are and the more observant you are, the chances for viewing animals and birds and insects is much greater. One of our eminent teachers, who has passed now, when he spoke of Anishinaabe, he would say, from whence, meaning kind of like the sky. And we are, after all of us human beings, made of stardust. And my father's translation is the one I like the best. Anishinaabeg means good earthling or good earth being. And when I heard that, I was just elated, because there's no hint of original sin in that name that we call ourselves, Anishinaabe. We are good people. And I guess my wish is that all people will come to see themselves as good people and want to take care of this beautiful earth.
A love of animals and nature motivated Debbie Nightingale of the Oat Goat Farm to leave city life behind.
I'm Farmer Debbie. We created this crazy magical place called Oat Goat Farm, which kind of has evolved over the years because people have a real desire to join us out here in nature with animals and all that great stuff. I always dreamed of being in the country, always, because I've always loved animals. But I married a man who was not so excited about the country or animals or dirt or any of that stuff. He retired, decided he did like animals, that they were okay. I said, fantastic, I want to get some goats. His jaw dropped. And I brought home my first 4 little Nigerian dwarf goats. So the Nigerian dwarf goats are one of 2 pygmy goats. The pygmies are one and the Nigerians are the other. The Nigis, as we call them in the trade, are the dairy goats. And that's sort of how we started. So we had our 4 little goats. Friends and family heard about it. They called and said, could we come and see the goats? And we said, of course, come share our joy, because these guys are incredible. And what happened was they came, and then they told people about it. And so every Saturday, 30 or 40 people would show up at the farm in Campbellford and say, we're here to see the goats. Until it dawned on us that we weren't the only ones who really craved being outside and in the country and nature, where you don't hear ambulances and police cars and noise and all that other stuff. And that's really and truly how it all started. Everyone's so disconnected, I feel like. I mean, I really do believe that. You know, when you're sitting in a car in Toronto and you can't move and somebody's honking at you or you're honking at them, you're so... I don't know how to describe it other than disconnected. Whereas when you can be here and you can take a deep breath and you can sort of be in sync with the animals, it's a different plane. It's a different level. It's a quietude. It gives you a chance to really think and process stuff. There are real scientific benefits to interacting with animals. They can reduce your stress hormones. The cortisol actually can come down if you're interacting with goats. That's for sure. If you really are able to sort of get into the relaxation and the connection, you end up breathing at the same rate as the goat, and that calms them down as well. They force you to be in the moment, and that's more important than anything. You know, you sort of forget all the other stuff, hopefully. Hopefully you're able to do that. But they force you to do that because they are that. They are in the moment. They're very present, and they encourage you to do the same. It's a very large property. I don't know how it happened. We have a very large property. Like the whole east section was not really being used. And so one of my kids said to me, why don't you make a disc golf course? I said, what's disc golf? And he showed me. And I teamed up with a fellow in Peterborough who's a disc golf course designer who's amazing, and he carved out a gorgeous disc golf course. And so that way other people are coming, more people are coming to use the farm, and it makes me so happy to see people traipsing back and forth, sitting here. They sit in front of my house, they have a picnic. It's the most wonderful thing. We purposely do not charge admission just to come in and walk around. We thought it was really important for anybody to be able to come and see the animals. We do charge if you want to do an experience, but we really also wanted people to be able to come without issue. So we often get single moms in the summer with their kids just coming and hanging out at the bench and watching the babies play and all that stuff. And although we don't advertise it, if somebody calls and says, I really want to do a such and such, but I really just don't have the money, we find a way to work with them. I had a very close relative passed away Sunday night, and Monday I was really I couldn't find somewhere to sit. And so I went and I literally sat on the hay bale in the middle of the horses, and they comforted me. You know, one of them actually put her head, wrapped her head around me. It's like, it's like, wow. I mean, my favorite thing, first of all, we get people here who cry before they even get to the goats because they're so excited. And then they cry again with the goats. It's the most beautiful thing, though. And they're a bit embarrassed, and we say, no, it's wonderful. But sometimes, you know, like a woman will bring her husband who doesn't really want to be here, and by the end, you can't get him out of the goat playground because a goat has, you know, nestled into his arms, and just he falls in love. And it's the most beautiful thing. We have alpacas, we have horses, we have Icelandic horses, which are really cool. We have a great big mule named Lucy May. We have a little miniature horse. We've got chickens, of course. And we just got Kuni pigs, who we've completely fallen in love with.
I just want to cuddle one.
There are sometimes people who are a little bit nervous or nervous of one particular kind of animal. And so we never push anybody. We'll say, you know, want to wait outside? Do you want to stand beside me? Like, how do you want to handle this? And often if you give them a little bit of time and a breath, and they see the animals calm and whatever, they'll come in and they'll, sort of get over their fears. So, and that's quite beautiful actually when that happens. I feel so lucky that we can give this experience to people and see the joy that it brings to them. We had a high-powered PR firm call us, and they said, we want to do goat yoga for a client, but we want to check it out first to see what it's like. So I said, okay, good, come. We set them up. There was about 8 of them. Lovely people, but real high-powered Toronto people. And I came down to watch at one point, and all of a sudden I saw 8 of the goats out of 10 do kind of a semicircle around the woman who was the company owner. I'd never seen that before. She said, my mother died 2 days ago. I think they were comforting me. And so that stuff happens, and there's a bazillion stories like that. And it's just, it blows me away. Every time, every time.
Part of it is the excitement of reeling in a fish, catching the big one. Your heart gets racing as soon as you get that little bite, and then you want to reel it in. That's like that adrenaline.
Ice fishing has a long and rich history on Manitoulin. The island has 108 freshwater lakes, and the water is home to some of the most popular species to catch, including rainbow trout and lake trout. For the past 12 years, the Wikwemikon First Nation, situated on the northeastern part of Manitoulin, has hosted an ice fishing derby on the island. This year, the weekend-long competition spanned over 2 bodies of water, Lake Manitou and Manitowoc Bay.
What we were trying to do was kind of trying to find tourism within the shoulder season, because obviously Manitoulin is beautiful during the summertime, but not too many people come in the winter. So that's what we wanted to try to attract.
The tournament provides a big economic boost to the area. This year marked the biggest turnout to date. More than 700 anglers descended on Manitoulin Island for the competition, 400 of whom were visiting from out of town.
We have a lot of people from northeastern Ontario, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, along that Highway 17 corridor. But now we're starting to notice that people are coming in from the States too, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and as far east as Quebec. So they're coming here, they want to come and fish the pristine hard water of Manitoulin Island.
The red stamp, that means you're fishing Manitowoc Bay. They will only weigh in your
Anglers
fish
start their day
if
bright and
your
early,
stamp is red.
checking in and making their way on the ice to one of the 300 pre-drilled holes. Once they have their rod out and their reel in the water, it's just a matter of time. But with $50,000 in cash and prizes, this derby is worth the wait.
If they catch a fish, their objective is to keep it alive and bring it to the closest weigh-in station. 3.2. You know, you might not catch nothing for the whole day, but at least you're out there with your friends and telling, jokes and stories, and it's just that camaraderie of being with family and friends.
Even though both lakes had completely frozen over, building up more than a foot of ice, the temperature this year was notably warmer.
Over the 12 years, it's hard to pinpoint the exact depth of the ice. It fluctuates every year. Obviously, we can notice the changes due to climate change, right? Some years are warmer, some years are way colder. One year it could be minus 40. Another year, like this year, it could go up to 2 degrees.
The ice fishing season in the province can range from several months in the northern regions to just a few weeks in southwestern Ontario. For anglers in Mitchell's Bay, the season is literally a wash. Located on the eastern shore of Lake Sinclair, Mitchell's Bay has a population of 200 and was once home to television host and fishing icon Red Fisher.
Well, hi, friends. Good to have you up the lodge again. I'm Red Fisher here, and this is Scuttlebutt Lodge, the tall tale capital of the world.
Mitchell's Bay is a one-road village, a dead-end road that ends at the lake. And the lake is what brings people to our community.
It's what drew Jim Williams and his family to the area. He grew up in nearby Chatham, Kent, and has fond memories of Mitchell's Bay as a child.
My parents had a wooden shanty that they would park the first week of January out in the bay. We would snowmobile to it on the weekends, and there was a pot-belly wood stove in the shanty. And my mom would make chili at home, and we would snowmobile as children to the shanty. My dad would cut holes in the ice for fishing. We would stay inside the shanty and eat chili. It's kind of a comfort memory of mine, of my childhood.
In 1996, his father would go on to buy the local restaurant in Mitchell's Bay. Jim would eventually take over and now runs it with his wife and 4 kids.
Parkside.
Business has been good, particularly in the summer, but during the winter, it's been anyone's guess.
It's been a mild winter. We have had some snowfall. The old cliche, the only consistent thing about our weather has been inconsistency.
It's recommended that ice cover be a minimum of 4 inches for walking on. That has not been the case for a majority of the season on Lake Sinclair.
This lake offers opportunities unlike any of the bigger Great Lakes. Not that we're a Great Lake, but because it's shallow and because it's small.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
In the winter, these waters are swarming with yellow perch.
2014 was a really good year for us as far as ice conditions. 2017 was another good year as far as ice conditions, so the lake froze completely over, and probably average thickness was 24 inches or 2 feet. So on a Saturday or Sunday, I could estimate that there'd be 500 vehicles here in the bay, where both parking lots at the end of the road were full. So what's happened in the time from 1996-97 to present, as the avid fisherman, the avid ice angler, because of the inconsistency of ice conditions here, has sought out other destinations, Lake Simcoe, Lake Nipissing, places where they know from on a year-to-year basis that they'll have reliable ice conditions.
It's not just bad for the ecosystem, it's really bad for the economy in a winter like this.
Gail Kranzenberg is an engineering and public policy professor at Hamilton's McMaster University. She's worked for the province's Ministry of Environment and was the director of the Great Lakes Regional Office of the International Joint Commission.
What we don't often think about is the recreational attributes of the Great Lakes in the winter, and the small villages and towns that have built a reputation on snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, ice fish on the lakes, and it's a huge draw to the small communities that have that ability to have a small embayment and have the ice there. In 2014, I think we had almost 90% ice cover across all of the Great Lakes, and now in some areas it's ice-free, in some areas it's a few percent.
As of early March, less than 9% of the Great Lakes were covered in ice.
The globe is warming, so we will warm, but a changing climate means more extreme events in our region. We may have more extreme cold winters, extremely warm winters.
For Jim's business, this winter represents thousands of dollars in lost revenue. He's hopeful the season can be salvaged.
We have no reason to believe that we will go back to the way it was 30 years ago. So I don't know that my children will ever experience what I did. We have to adapt to the changes that have happened and move forward with it. And if we can go out for 2 hours and enjoy the pop-up shanty and a little bit of fishing and then come in, at least we're still able to enjoy that experience. As long as I can expose my kids to that opportunity, then I think that's a positive thing.
Coming up Thursday on the agenda.
And nothing else connected with me, you know. I mean, I liked soccer, I guess, but music, like my brothers were always outside running around, and I was always like sitting by the stereo.
That's Thursday on the agenda.